The night before I pitched my lifelong dream to investors, I checked my bank account, and $98,000 was gone. My little brother had bought a car with it. My parents. They called me selfish for being upset. If you've ever wondered what it means to stand up for yourself when your own family is the one tearing you down, this story is for you. Kevin Mitchell had never been flashy. At 33, while most of his friends were buying homes, upgrading to luxury cars, or jetting off to European getaways, Kevin was living in a modest studio apartment in Capitol Hill, Seattle. His furniture was second-hand, his clothes carefully thrifted, and his dinners more often than not consisted of rice, lentils, and frozen vegetables. Every dollar he could spare went into one account, his dream fund. For 4 years, Kevin had been funneling money with relentless discipline into a separate savings account, with a single purpose: to open a community art studio in the Fremont district. It wasn't just a vanity project or a post-pandemic passion. It was a lifelong dream rooted in his college years, where he'd hosted local gallery nights and seen firsthand how art could give people a voice, a place to belong. He envisioned a light-filled space where emerging artists could work, exhibit, and teach workshops. A coffee bar in the corner, easels lining the walls, music drifting softly under the hum of creativity. It was the kind of dream people called impractical. Kevin heard that often. "You're the reliable one," his father Frank liked to say, "but maybe be a bit more realistic." His younger brother Brandon was the opposite of Kevin in almost every way. At 29, Brandon was a self-styled influencer who posted motivational quotes over selfies, made unboxing videos for lifestyle brands, and had recently taken to calling himself a visionary content strategist. What that meant in practice was that Brandon lived at home with their parents, rarely held a job for more than a few months, and leaned heavily on the family to support his erratic endeavors. Their parents, Frank and Linda Mitchell, never really hid their favoritism. Brandon had always been the golden boy. In high school, he was the charming athlete voted prom king. Linda, a senior customer service manager at Cascade Bank, gushed about Brandon's latest projects at church functions. Meanwhile, Kevin was the quiet achiever with straight A's and a portfolio of impressive internships that earned little more than a nod. Still, Kevin had held on to hope that things were changing. Just 3 months ago, during a family barbecue, he had shared his vision for the studio. He'd even brought sketches, architectural plans he had printed out, and digital mock-ups. For once, his parents seemed impressed. His mother said, "Kevin, that sounds amazing." His father clinked his beer to Kevin's soda and said, "Proud of you, son." Brandon even asked a few questions about the artist Kevin wanted to feature. That moment had lingered in Kevin's mind. For the first time, he felt seen, like maybe the tides of attention and approval were finally shifting. Maybe his hard work, his sacrifices, his vision were finally being recognized. So on a rainy Thursday night, curled up at his desk, prepping for the biggest investor pitch of his life, Kevin logged into his savings account to verify the final number. He was obsessive about it, checking interest rates, monthly updating security protocols, dreaming about the day he'd sign the lease. He expected to see the figure that had fueled his every sacrifice, $100,000. Instead, the screen blinked back at him with a brutal, unbelievable total, $2.14.39. He blinked, refreshed the browser, closed and reopened the page. The number didn't change. His heart pounded as if it wanted to escape his chest. He logged into his transaction history, scrolling back. A single transfer caught his eye, a massive withdrawal of $98,000 sent to a Tesla dealership in downtown Seattle. The transfer had occurred 2 days ago. No, Kevin muttered. His hands trembled as he picked up his phone and dialed the bank's 24-hour helpline. He listened to the hold music for what felt like a lifetime before a calm voice answered, asking for verification. He gave his name, his account number, his security questions. When they asked for the verbal password, his mother's maiden name, something sharp and cold twisted in his gut. After a pause, the representative confirmed the transaction had been authorized using correct security credentials. Kevin asked for specifics, who the voice on the other end told him as gently as a stranger could that everything had checked out from their side. The withdrawal was executed with full identity verification. Kevin's breath caught. He felt dizzy. The password was something only family would know. He hadn't shared it with anyone else. And suddenly one face flashed through his mind. Brandon. Then almost against his own instincts, he shook the thought away. No. That would be too low, too absurd, even for Brandon, even for their family. He sat in silence for a long moment, the screen still glaring at him, a monument to loss. His dream, the one he had nurtured like a fragile seedling for years, had just been burned to ash. But still some part of him clung to hope. Maybe it was a mistake, a mix-up, a hack, something that could be undone. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The unraveling had just begun. The next morning, Kevin didn't go into work. He didn't call in. He couldn't focus long enough to string a sentence together. The only thought dominating his mind was the $98,000. His $98,000 vanished overnight into someone else's hands. And all signs, no matter how hard he tried to deny it, pointed to his younger brother. By noon, Kevin drove through the gray drizzle of Seattle toward Brandon's apartment in Queen Anne. The building was modern, the kind of place that screamed Instagram aesthetic, white marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows, a ring light always within reach. Kevin had never visited before. Brandon had moved in a few months ago, courtesy of a brand deal that paid for 6 months of rent up front. That, plus a healthy infusion from their parents, made influencer life look far more lucrative than it was. He knocked. The door opened almost immediately. Brandon stood barefoot, sipping green juice, phone in hand. He raised an eyebrow, not at all surprised. "Kev, didn't expect you." Kevin stepped inside. No greeting. No time for pleasantries. "Did you take it?" he asked, voice taut. $98,000 from my savings account, for a Tesla." Brandon blinked. Then in a way that made Kevin's stomach churn, he smirked. "Oh. That." Kevin's voice cracked, the words catching in his throat. "That was my studio fund, everything I've worked for." Brandon shrugged and walked toward the kitchen, pouring his juice into a glass like they were discussing the weather. "Relax. You're the responsible one. You'll bounce back." "I needed the car. It's part of the brand." Kevin felt as though the floor beneath him gave way. You admit it. Just like that. You weren't using it right away, were you?" Brandon leaned against the counter, scrolling casually on his phone. "You were always talking about your someday studio." "I've got momentum right now. I just hit 100K followers." That car was the next step in the image. Kevin clenched his fists, barely able to breathe. "That was my dream, Brandon. You stole it." Brandon didn't even look up. "Man, stop being dramatic. You've always been the saver. You'll figure it out. Don't make this a big deal." The words struck like hammers. Kevin turned to leave, his hands trembling. As he stepped into the elevator, his phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Brandon Visionary had posted a new story. Kevin opened it. It was a selfie. Brandon grinning behind the wheel of a brand new Tesla Model Y, captioned, "Some people can't handle when you shine brighter than them. Let the haters hate." Kevin stared at the screen, pulse pounding. The comments were already rolling in. Heart emojis, fire emojis. "You deserve it, bro. Ignore the jealousy. Family's always the first to try and hold you back." He felt sick. But the next step was the hardest. He drove to Ballard, his childhood home, the house with the same white picket fence, the same tidy lawn, the same wind chimes at the porch. He hadn't come here often in the last year, preferring to keep his visits short and pleasant. But today he needed something more than politeness. He needed his parents to see him, to believe him. Linda opened the door, apron dusted with flour. "Kevin, sweetheart, I thought you were at work." "Mom," he said, voice strained, "we need to talk, now." She led him to the kitchen. Frank was on the recliner in the living room reading something on his tablet. The air smelled like cinnamon rolls. Kevin didn't waste time. He told them everything. The bank call, the missing $98,000, the transfer, Brandon's confession, the post. His hands shook the entire time. When he finished, he waited for the anger, the outrage, the defense of what was right. Instead, silence, then a sigh. Frank set down his tablet. "Kevin, let's not blow this out of proportion." Kevin blinked. "Blow, Dad? He stole from me." Linda stepped in. "It's not like that. Brandon's been struggling since that sponsorship fell through. He needed a boost. A boost," Kevin choked. "With my life savings, he said he'd pay you back," Linda offered quickly. "He just needed to get back on his feet." Kevin's breath caught. He never even apologized. Linda looked pained. "Honey, he didn't mean harm. Families help each other." "No," Kevin said, voice cold. "Families don't do this." Frank folded his arms. "You've always been the practical one, Kev. You'll recover. Brandon doesn't have your resilience." Kevin stared at them. His own parents, the ones who cheered when he got promoted, who toasted him over barbecue, who saw his dream sketches, and they were siding with the thief, with the liar. His chest tightened not from rage but from something deeper, betrayal. A sharp personal abandonment. His dream was reduced to an inconvenience, his sacrifice a footnote. And the worst part, the most unbearable part, was the creeping suspicion he could no longer deny. His mother, Linda Mitchell, longtime customer service officer at Cascade Bank, the same bank where Kevin had his savings account. She had no malicious intent, he believed that. But she had access. She knew his accounts. She knew his security questions. She knew his verbal password. Kevin looked at her, the realization forming. "Mom," he whispered, "the account was accessed using your maiden name. That's my security word." She paused. Just a flicker. Her hands tightened around the kitchen towel. "I would never," she began. But Kevin didn't need her to finish. Whether she gave it intentionally or carelessly, the result was the same. She had handed Brandon the keys. He stepped back. "I can't believe this. You're enabling me. You've always enabled me." Frank stood. "You're being emotional. I'm being robbed." Linda reached for his arm. "He's your brother, Kevin. He didn't mean it. He'll pay it back." Kevin pulled away. "No, he won't. And even if he did, it wouldn't undo this. What he took wasn't just money, it was everything I worked for, everything I am." Silence. The wind chimes outside clinked gently in the afternoon breeze. Kevin turned and walked out without another word. He didn't look back. Kevin didn't sleep the night he left his parents' house. He sat in his car for hours, engine off, parked outside a 24-hour diner he didn't have the appetite to enter. The betrayal weighed heavier than he expected. Not just from Brandon, but from Frank and Linda too, their quick dismissal, the way they brushed off the theft like it was a small inconvenience, a hiccup in the family timeline. It wasn't. It was his future. By sunrise, Kevin knew he couldn't carry this alone. He called Marcus Rivera, his oldest friend from college and now a respected investigative journalist for the Seattle Observer. Marcus answered on the second ring, voice groggy but familiar. Kevin didn't waste time. Brandon stole my savings, nearly $100,000, and Mom, she might have helped without realizing. There was a pause. Kevin, Marcus said slowly, waking up fast. That's not just messed up, that's identity theft. Kevin exhaled sharply. He hadn't said it aloud yet. Identity theft. It sounded cold, legal, like something strangers did, not family. But Marcus wasn't being dramatic, he was naming it. They met later that afternoon at a coffee shop near Pioneer Square. Kevin laid everything out, the savings plan, the transfer, Brandon's confession, the social media posts, his parents' reaction. Marcus listened carefully, nodding, scribbling in a worn leather notebook. You need to talk to a lawyer, now. Kevin nodded, the pit in his stomach hardening. Marcus handed him a business card, Gregory Walsh, financial and civil litigation. He's solid, Marcus said. Won't sugarcoat anything. Gregory's office in downtown Seattle was all cool glass metal lines and quiet authority. Kevin sat across from the man in a navy suit, still unsure how to process the reality of needing legal defense against his own brother. This is a textbook case, Gregory said after reviewing the documentation. Kevin brought bank statements, screenshots of Brandon's posts, a timeline of events. Unauthorized use of personal information for financial gain. Theft by deception. Possibly fraud. Kevin winced. But he's my brother. And my mom, she didn't mean to help him. Not really. Gregory leaned forward. Intent is important, Kevin, but consequences are more so. If your mother's position at the bank gave her access and she shared or failed to protect that access, she's at least complicit through negligence. The law doesn't excuse family ties. The words landed like small explosions. Complicit, negligence, family ties. Kevin rubbed his temple. He felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff. One step forward meant letting go of whatever scraps of loyalty he had left. Gregory handed him a file. I'll prepare the paperwork for a civil suit. Meanwhile, you need to file a formal fraud claim with the bank and a police report. Kevin nodded slowly, still torn. Isn't that extreme? Kevin, Gregory said gently. He didn't borrow your money, he stole it. If a stranger had done this, you wouldn't hesitate. Don't let blood cloud your judgment. That night, Kevin stared at the fraud reporting form on his laptop. The bank's website had a portal for filing such complaints. He hovered over the fields, uploaded the documents, typed out the narrative, and paused. Images flooded his mind, him and Brandon as kids playing tag in the backyard, his mom bandaging his knee after a fall, his dad teaching him to drive. Were those memories enough to outweigh this betrayal? His phone buzzed. A new story from Brandon. This time a slow pan of the Tesla's dashboard captioned, "Can't stop me. Even family can't bring me down." Vibes. Only Kevin stared at the screen. His jaw clenched. It was never going to stop unless he made it stop. He clicked submit on the bank's fraud form. Then he opened the Seattle Police Department's website and began his report. The Mitchell family's annual summer barbecue had always been a crowded, messy affair. Dozens of relatives packed into Frank and Linda's backyard, kids darting between legs, burgers sizzling on the grill, and someone inevitably bringing a tray of undercooked deviled eggs. For most of Kevin's life, it had been one of the few traditions that held the family together. This year, it felt like walking into enemy territory. He almost didn't go. Marcus had warned him, Gregory had advised against it, and Kevin's gut screamed that it was a mistake. But some foolish, aching part of him still hoped. Maybe, just maybe, facing everyone would bring truth into the open. Maybe someone would speak up. Maybe it wouldn't be as bad as he feared. He arrived with a small gift, a bottle of wine his mother liked, and a vague sense of nausea. The backyard looked the same as always. Fairy lights strung up between trees, a long buffet table, uncles laughing by the grill. But something was off. People turned when he walked in. The noise dipped, conversations paused, a few cousins gave him stiff nods. Others looked away. His Aunt June, who used to call him her little artist, barely acknowledged him. Linda was arranging fruit skewers at the picnic table. She glanced up. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Kevin, you came." "It's tradition," he said quietly. She didn't respond, just turned back to the fruit. Brandon was by the pool, lounging like a celebrity. His sunglasses perched on his forehead, a Bluetooth speaker playing chill beats at his feet. The Tesla keys twirled around his fingers like a trophy. Frank greeted Kevin with a curt nod. "Get a plate. Burgers are ready." Kevin stood near the edge of the gathering, unsure where to fit in. A few relatives asked vague questions, the kind that danced around the real topic. He could feel the weight of whispers behind his back, the caution in people's eyes. No one said it, but they all knew. Halfway through the afternoon, Kevin couldn't take it anymore. He clinked his glass and stepped onto the small wooden deck beside the pool. "I know most of you have heard something by now," he began, voice steady but tight. "About Brandon, about me, about the lawsuit. I just want to say something clearly since no one else seems willing to." The backyard fell quiet. Even the kids froze. "Brandon stole $98,000 from me. Money I saved over 4 years to open an art studio. He used personal information that only family would know to access my account. And when I went to our parents hoping for help, they defended him." There was a long, stunned silence. Brandon stood, arms folded. "You done with the martyr speech?" he said loudly. "Because it's getting old." Kevin's jaw tightened. "This isn't about drama, it's about theft." Frank stood up from his folding chair, setting down his beer with a loud thud. His voice carried across the yard like thunder. "If you don't drop this ridiculous lawsuit, don't come back here again. Do you hear me? You are tearing this family apart over a car." Kevin looked at his father. "It's not just a car, Dad. It's my future, my life." "Brandon needs that car for his career," Frank snapped. "You, Kevin, you'll bounce back. You always do." Then came Linda's voice, soft but razor sharp. "How could you be so cruel to your own blood? He's your brother. What kind of person drags their own family into court?" Kevin turned to her. "The kind of person who was stolen from, lied to, abandoned." The air was thick. Eyes darted between them. No one spoke. Brandon scoffed. "You're so bitter, it's embarrassing. Get over it." Kevin's voice cracked, not from weakness but fury. "I gave up everything to build something meaningful, and you paraded around in what you stole like it was a badge of success." Frank pointed at the gate. "Enough. If you won't let this go, you're not welcome here. Not today. Not ever." Kevin looked around the backyard. The familiar faces now felt foreign, his stomach clenched, heat crawling up his neck. "Okay," he said quietly. "I hear you." He turned and walked through the gate, the echo of silence following him like a second skin. Not a single person called after him. By the time he reached his car, his vision blurred. Not from rage, from grief, a quiet, brutal grief that carved something out of him. The family he'd tried so hard to hold on to had just cut him loose. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. 3 days after the barbecue, Kevin drove north through the gray drizzle to the quiet suburb where his Uncle Rick lived. The drive was long and silent, a kind of penance, or maybe a pilgrimage. Rick hadn't been at the barbecue, nor had Kevin expected him to be. Rick was Linda's brother, and years ago he had slipped out of the family orbit for reasons no one had ever fully explained, at least not to Kevin. He parked in front of the modest split-level home and hesitated. Then he got out. Rick opened the door before Kevin could knock. He was older now, grayer, but his eyes softened when he saw Kevin. I was wondering when you'd come, Rick said, stepping aside. Come in. Nathan's here too. Kevin stepped inside, taking in the scent of old books and coffee. Nathan, Rick's son, Kevin's cousin, was lounging on the couch with a mug in hand. He stood up, surprised. Kev, wow, you okay? Kevin let out a tired laugh. No, not really. They sat in the living room and Kevin recounted everything. The stolen savings, Brandon's smug confession, the parents' betrayal, the barbecue ultimatum. Rick listened with a face like stone. Nathan looked grim. Brandon did the same thing 5 years ago, Nathan said quietly. Kevin blinked. What? 10,000? Rick said. From the family trust fund your grandparents left for all the cousins. Brandon accessed it with your mom's help or negligence, more likely. Claimed he was just borrowing it to help a friend start a business. He never paid it back, Nathan added. I confronted your parents. They said I was making a big deal out of nothing. Then they stopped inviting us to holidays. Kevin stared at them, stunned. Rick sighed. They covered for him, Kevin. Just like they're doing now. They've always bent the truth to protect Brandon. Kevin felt something shift in him, a weight moving. He'd spent so long believing his pain was an isolated wound, that his heartbreak came from some personal failing or unique injustice. But it wasn't just him. This had happened before, and it had been buried, denied, forgotten until now. It wasn't about the money, Nathan said. It was how they made me feel, like I was the problem for expecting fairness. Like I was disloyal for wanting accountability. Kevin nodded slowly. That's exactly how they made me feel. It's not you, Rick said. It's them. It's always been them. Kevin left Rick's house with his heart pounding. The grief was still there, but now it had shape. Now it had history. This wasn't just Brandon's betrayal, it was a family system built on favoritism, denial, and silence. That night, Kevin couldn't sleep. He found himself Googling therapists in Seattle. After an hour of reading reviews, he found one that stood out, Dr. Evelyn Ross, Family Systems and Trauma Recovery. He sent the inquiry form before he could second-guess himself. Dr. Ross's office sat in a quiet building near Capitol Hill. When Kevin walked in for the first session, he felt like an imposter. He'd always been the strong one, the responsible one, not the one who needed help, Dr. Ross was in her early 50s with silver-streaked hair and a voice that didn't flinch. She invited him to sit and asked why he was there. Kevin told her everything, and for the first time he didn't sugarcoat it. When he finished, she looked at him and said, "What you're describing is emotional enmeshment." Kevin frowned. What does that mean? It means you were raised in a system where your needs were secondary to keeping the peace, where roles were rigid. You're the responsible one, Brandon's the special one. You've been conditioned to carry the family's weight even if it breaks you. Kevin sat back stunned. Her words landed like puzzle pieces snapping into place. You've never been allowed to say no, she continued. Not without punishment. Guilt, exclusion, that's not love, Kevin, that's control. For a moment he couldn't breathe. It was like someone had reached into his chest and untangled a knot he didn't know was there. You didn't deserve what happened to you, Dr. Ross said gently. And it's not your job to fix a broken system. Kevin left the session shaken but clearer than he had felt in weeks. This wasn't about a stolen car. This was about a life spent asking for scraps of fairness from people who never planned to offer it. And now finally he was ready to stop asking. The first thing Kevin did after his next therapy session with Dr. Ross was open a brand new savings account at a different bank, one that came with high-level alerts, multi-factor authentication, and no ties to his past. No shared passwords, no familial footprints, just his name, his dream, and layers of digital steel. He stood at the counter watching the teller print his account documents and felt something strange flicker in his chest. Not pride, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, hope. Every penny would have to be rebuilt from scratch, no shortcuts. But Kevin wasn't the same man who'd lost everything overnight. He was sharper now. Hardened, yes, but also clearer. He knew what to guard and what to release. And more than anything, he knew who he was protecting his dream from. Back home, he poured himself a cup of black coffee and opened his laptop. The familiar spreadsheet blinked at him, a budget he hadn't dared open in months. He wiped his palms against his jeans, clicked the tab, and started again. Dollars. Target, $100,000. Timeline, as long as it takes. That same afternoon, a message lit up his inbox. It was from David Wang, one of the investors who had attended Kevin's original pitch session, the one that had been sabotaged by Brandon's theft. The subject line read, "Let's talk." Kevin opened it, breath caught halfway in his throat. Kevin, I came across a feature in the Seattle Beacon today. I had no idea what you've been going through. I'm so sorry. If you're open to it, I'd love to hear how your vision for the studio has evolved. Your story struck a chord. David Kevin stared at the screen, stunned. The Seattle Beacon. He hadn't spoken to any journalists. He didn't have to guess long. Marcus. He picked up his phone and called him. Marcus's voice came in casual, breezy. Hey man, you see it? Kevin didn't even try to sound annoyed. You wrote about me? Marcus chuckled. I reported on you. That's my job. Don't worry, I didn't name the bank and I blurred Brandon's face in the screenshots. But the story, the emotional truth that needed to be told. Kevin pulled in a breath. It's going viral, isn't it? Last time I checked, over 200,000 reads, front page on Medium and reprinted on 2 other platforms. Twitter's eating it up. You're David versus Goliath, except Goliath is your family. Kevin didn't know what to say. A strange mix of panic and gratitude twisted in his gut. You should have warned me. Would you have let me publish it if I did? He didn't answer. Marcus's tone softened. Look, Kev, people need stories like yours, not just for the drama, for the healing. You're giving folks language for the betrayal they've felt and never named. Kevin sat down, stunned. Brandon's not going to like this. Funny you mention that, Marcus replied, and Kevin could hear him clicking keys. His sponsors are pulling out. I've already seen 3 brands distance themselves. One even issued a public statement. Kevin stared into the distance. It wasn't joy he felt. It wasn't revenge. But it was justice, maybe, or accountability. Marcus added, he can spin it how he wants online, but the receipts are public now. The tide's turning. Kevin ended the call feeling equal parts exposed and empowered. The weight of secrecy had been ripped off like a bandage. Now everyone could see the wound and perhaps in time how he'd heal from it. 3 days later, something miraculous happened. Kevin painted again. It wasn't a masterpiece, it wasn't even very good. But he pulled out a canvas, opened his old box of acrylics, and let his hands move. The colors smeared awkwardly. The brush felt unfamiliar. But the act was pure freedom. He hadn't painted since the theft, since the trauma. His art supplies had sat untouched in the corner like relics from a past life. Now standing barefoot in his tiny apartment, strokes landing on canvas, music humming from a Bluetooth speaker. Kevin felt alive. It was a landscape, a messy impression of the view from Cary Park at sunset. The Space Needle in silhouette, the bay glowing orange, the sky soft with blues and fire. He stepped back and stared at it. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like a victim. He felt like an artist. Word spread, his story had traction. Messages started pouring in, not just from investors or media types, but from strangers across the country. Your story reminded me of when my brother drained our family's emergency fund. I left home at 18 because of the same kind of favoritism. Thank you for putting it into words. This made me cry, and it made me call my therapist. Some emails made him cry. Others filled him with quiet strength. They weren't just affirming his pain, they were validating his fight. This wasn't just about Kevin anymore. It was about every person who had ever been told to keep quiet, to take one for the team, to sacrifice in slints. He started journaling every night, pouring his thoughts into a battered notebook. Therapy sessions with Dr. Ross grew more productive, less about surviving, more about growing. He talked about boundaries, about building a new kind of life, about worth that didn't require validation from people who'd withheld it for decades. He no longer checked Brandon's social media. He didn't need to. He wasn't chasing that thread anymore. What mattered now was the brush in his hand, the new account growing by small deposits, the reawakened connection to a dream that still pulsed beneath the scars. One morning, he received a FedEx envelope from David Wang. Inside was a letter, Kevin. This isn't an investment offer yet, but it is a promise. If you get close to your fundraising goal again, I'd like to match your final $10,000. No strings attached, just faith in your story and the space you want to create. You've got fire. Let's build something with it. Kevin sat with the letter in his lap for a long time. Tears welled up, not from sorrow this time, but from being seen. This wasn't just recovery, this was resurrection. 2 weeks after Marcus's article had gone viral, Kevin received a call that froze him in place. It was Amanda Foster from the bank's internal investigation team. Her voice was calm, measured, but Kevin could hear a shift beneath it, something final. "Kevin," she said, "we've concluded our investigation, and we owe you an apology." She explained that Patricia Mitchell, his mother, had improperly accessed his account credentials, specifically the security metadata tied to his online profile. While there was no evidence she had directly transferred the funds, her access had created the breach that allowed Brandon to act. That level of negligence, especially from an internal employee, was a serious violation of bank protocol. "Due to our failure to safeguard your account appropriately," Amanda continued, "we will be restoring the full $100,000 to your savings within the week." Kevin sat down heavily, the wind knocked from him. Not because he was surprised, but because the dream, the one that had felt shattered beyond repair, was quietly being returned, and yet there was no joy, no victory lap, only a strange emptiness. Amanda added that Patricia was now under formal internal review. Her reputation within the bank had taken a severe hit, and while she hadn't been fired, she'd been reassigned and removed from any role involving client access. It was a professional demotion, one that would shadow her career. As Kevin hung up, his phone buzzed again. Gregory Walsh, his lawyer. "Brandon's settlement just came through," Gregory said, his voice crisp. "The court ordered him to repay $15,000 in damages covering legal fees and lost interest. A 5-year repayment plan. He also forfeits the vehicle. Tesla agreed to revoke the sale due to fraud." Kevin thanked him and stared at the quiet screen of his phone. The numbers, the money, the court ruling, the consequences, they were just that. Numbers. On paper, justice had arrived. Restitution had been made, but in his chest the feeling was hollow. He drove by the Tesla dealership later that day. The white Model Y that had once gleamed in Brandon's Instagram stories was no longer parked in the influencer row. A different car, a black SUV, now stood in its place. Kevin didn't stop. He didn't need to. That night, alone in his apartment, Kevin opened his bank app. The numbers were back, 6 figures glowing on the screen. The balance he had worked years to build, stolen in a single betrayal, now quietly returned. He should have felt triumphant, but all he felt was a deep, echoing ache, the ache of what he'd lost that couldn't be refunded. His phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Human Resources at the bank where his mother worked. A formal letter acknowledging the institution's failure, attaching a document that outlined new staff training on account security and ethical access. His mother hadn't messaged him since the barbecue. Not to apologize, not to explain. Instead, Linda Mitchell had been telling extended family that Kevin had exaggerated the situation, that Brandon had just made a youthful mistake, and Kevin had blown it out of proportion. Kevin didn't reply. He received one final letter that week, a printout hand-mailed with no return address, but he recognized the handwriting instantly. It was from Brandon. The letter was 3 pages of deflection. Brandon wrote about how his career had imploded, how sponsors had dropped him, how the internet had turned against him. He called Kevin vindictive. Then in the last paragraph he asked for mercy. "You got your money back. Isn't that enough? Why do you want to ruin me?" Kevin read the letter twice, then he folded it up and placed it in the bottom drawer of his desk beneath old tax forms and appliance manuals. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say. He wasn't seeking revenge, but justice wasn't about feelings. It was about truth, about consequences. He went back to therapy that week, sitting across from Dr. Evelyn Ross in the now familiar room lined with books and a soft ticking clock. He told her everything: the resolution, the money, the letter. "I thought I'd feel better," he admitted. "I thought, I don't know, that this would feel like closure." Dr. Ross nodded. "Closure doesn't come from justice. It comes from healing, from grieving the version of your life you hoped for." Kevin blinked back the weight in his chest. "Your parents didn't just betray you," she continued. "They taught you to expect betrayal. They taught you that your needs were secondary, that your worth was negotiable, and you believed them." He looked at the carpet, the edges of the pattern blurring. "But that belief is breaking now," she said, "and that's why this hurts more than you expected. Because you're finally unlearning it." Kevin left her office that day with no profound sense of victory. But he felt steadier, more grounded, less lost. The next morning he woke up and walked to a local cafe, not one where Brandon had once posed for lifestyle shots, but a quiet spot filled with old wood furniture and soft jazz. He pulled out his sketch pad. Not for work, not for therapy, just for him. The page was blank. The pen hovered. Then slowly Kevin began to draw. Justice had come. But what mattered more was what he did with the space it left behind. Kevin sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, staring at the endless stream of messages. Some were guilt trips from his mother. Others were angry texts from his father. Brandon had sent memes, voice notes, and even a picture of them as kids captioned, "We were family." Enough. He scrolled to the block list. One by one, Mom, Dad, Brandon, he added their names. The weight that followed wasn't fear. It was freedom. He took down the family photos from his wall, not out of hate, but from clarity. He packed the letters, birthday cards, and notes from college into a box and slid it into the back of his closet. Therapy helped him name the ache. Dr. Evelyn Ross said gently, "You're grieving not the people, but the fantasy of who you hoped they'd become." Kevin nodded through tears. That's what hurt the hope. The belief that if he worked hard enough, was kind enough, they'd treat him fairly. That if he kept giving, they'd give back. They didn't, but others did. Uncle Rick invited him for weekend hikes. Nathan showed up with takeout and old inside jokes. Marcus, as always, held space steadfast and true. These weren't just friends, they were family by choice, not blood. Kevin's apartment slowly transformed. New canvases leaned against the walls, a fresh plant sat in the windowsill. He painted again for the first time in months. Each stroke felt like reclaiming a piece of himself. He still had hard nights. He missed the idea of his family, especially during quiet moments. But there was no longer guilt tied to their absence, just space for something better. One morning, looking at his reflection, Kevin didn't see someone broken. He saw a man who had survived heartbreak and chosen peace. Someone who stopped chasing love from those who couldn't give it. He didn't hate them. He simply let them go. And in that letting go, he found room to grow. The Fremont studio stood nestled on a corner just off the main street, once a dream, now real. Kevin signed the lease with steady hands and a full heart. Light poured through the wide windows each morning, illuminating the hardwood floors and blank canvases waiting to be touched by color and life. He spent the first week painting the walls, assembling easels, and pinning up local artists' flyers. When the doors opened, the community trickled in, curious neighbors, aspiring artists, old friends who'd followed his journey. It wasn't just a studio. It was a beginning. Kevin started offering free art classes for children on Saturdays. He filled the space with music, laughter, and the scratch of brushes against canvas. During one class, a little girl tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Kevin," she said, her eyes shining. "I didn't think I was good at anything, but you made me feel like I am." Those words rooted deep in his heart. This was why he'd fought. Not for revenge, not even just for himself, but to make space for hope. To remind people and himself that healing could bloom where pain had taken root. Over the weeks, the studio transformed. Artists brought in their work, offering pieces for the gallery wall. Coffee brewed in a corner nook. A local musician offered to play at Friday night exhibitions. Kevin stood among them, no longer the man holding his dream together with quiet desperation. He was the anchor now, the one who created a home for others. One late afternoon, while cleaning brushes at the front table, he caught a figure standing across the street. It was his father, Frank. He looked older than Kevin remembered, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the studio's front window. He didn't approach, didn't wave, just stood there, watching. Kevin didn't move. 1,000 feelings surged, anger, sorrow, the ghost of longing. But none took over. Instead, he breathed in deeply and returned to the sink. There was no bitterness left, just distance, just peace. As evening settled, the studio glowed with soft lamplight. Inside, a boy laughed while sketching a dragon. A woman framed her first watercolor. Kevin looked around and felt a warmth that no inheritance, no approval could match. He had built this, a place of light, a chosen family. And for the first time in his life, he felt whole. This was home. Kevin sat by the window of his Fremont studio as golden light poured in, sketchbook, open, tea cooling beside him. For once, he wasn't drawing to escape, to impress, or to survive. He was simply drawing because it felt good. Looking back on his journey, the pieces formed a clear picture, one of quiet pain, unexpected strength, and hard-earned peace. He had been the fixer for so long, the one who endured, who bent until he nearly broke. But now he was someone else entirely. He was a man who said no, who chose silence over chaos, boundaries over begging, peace over performance. His mother hadn't apologized. Neither had Brandon. There was no letter, no voicemail, no tearful confession. Just silence. But it didn't hurt like it used to. The silence was no longer a wound. It was a choice, and one Kevin could finally live with. In therapy, Dr. Ross smiled when he shared that thought. "Family," she said, "isn't who needs you the most. It's who deserves your heart the most." Kevin held on to that. Every week his studio brimmed with laughter and paint, children learning to express themselves, teenagers finding safety, adults returning to creativity after years of being told it didn't matter. His space wasn't just healing him, it was healing others. He found joy in the little things, sharing coffee with Marcus, trading sarcasm with Nathan, debating music with Rick. The family he'd chosen didn't need him to sacrifice for love. They loved him for who he already was. On a quiet Sunday morning, Kevin opened his laptop and began to write. Not a business proposal or a therapy journal, a post, one he'd thought about for months. The words flowed easily. My brother stole my dream, my parents watched. I lost $100,000, but I found myself. He didn't name names, he didn't seek pity, he just told the truth about sacrifice, about betrayal, about healing. The post went viral. People messaged him from across the country. Some shared their own family wounds, others just said thank you. Kevin didn't need their validation, but their words reminded him his pain had meaning beyond himself. The journey wasn't about revenge, it was about rebirth. And with every brushstroke, every workshop, every shared story, Kevin finally understood what family really meant.